Hello everyone, welcome to a new Process Mining Café. Today we are talking about project versus process thinking. And it's a really interesting topic because it's a little bit implicitly assumed to be there, a process awareness, right? So that the organization is aware of the importance of processes and understands that processes have an outcome, have an impact on the desired outcome, and that how you can change the processes to improve these very same desired outcomes. So what do you do as a process miner if that level of process awareness is not really there yet at your organization? And this is what we're going to talk about today. For this discussion, I'm joined by our guest. Our guest today is Fred van Middendorp from Heijmans, and I'm joined by our very own Rudi as well. Hi Fred, hi Rudi.
Hello. Hi everyone.
Yes, so we will start discussing this topic in a moment. Before we do that, I want to remind all of you who are watching right now that, as always, you can join the discussion while we are on the air. So just below this video where you are watching this right now, you see a chat option where you can just type in your name. You don't need a password or anything. You can just type the name and then enter the chat. And so there you will be in the discussion group, and you can share your thoughts, add questions, and also let us know your experiences with process awareness, and what did you do in organizations in the past where you encountered that there was maybe a lack of process awareness, and which strategies worked for you. So we are really curious to hear that. And so throughout the session we will keep an eye on the chat and pick up any tips and questions that come through there. And all right, so let's get started, right? Fred, we invited you for this topic today because you're the perfect guest for project versus process thinking. Because which company is more of a project-driven organization than a construction company, right? So all you do is projects, and you brought some pictures to show us a little bit the type of work that Heijmans is doing. So should we start with that and showing these pictures?
So let's introduce Heijmans.
Yes, exactly. So let me see. Let me put those slides up here. Here's the first picture. What is the first picture? What is this?
Thank you for having me this afternoon. And I want to explain something about the company so we can discuss later on what's happening in our company. Heijmans is a construction company, and one of in the Netherlands we are very familiar on the road, near the highways. And the picture you see is one of our projects we have done in the infrastructure, is making and renewing an intersection. It's a project we do for the Dutch government, and it's a project we ask what our customer wants. In case the government, we design the intersection. And afterwards we execute, and you see here a picture of executing this project. And that is one of the examples, the business streams of infrastructure we have, and it's very familiar in the Netherlands. The red, the yellow, orange cars on the road, everyone sees them. So
you see them everywhere. That's correct.
So that is very visible. When you talk about Heijmans company, everyone say, "Oh, that is the yellow cars on the road."
Yeah,
exactly. That's very familiar. But we do more.
So should I go to the next one?
Yeah, the next one is another example we do here. Is Schiphol Airport. Everyone who's traveling to the Netherlands and you come at the main airport is Schiphol Airport. We have to maintain the buildings. When you walk in through the door to the departure, or you come to the arrival, all that buildings are maintained by Heijmans. And on the other side, there is a business stream infrastructure who is improving the runways, that kind of work we do. So that's one of our strategic partner of Schiphol Airport. And there you can see my colleagues working to make a safe place to come in and go through by your holiday. So that's one of our projects as well. This picture is one of the Dutch Parliament, also one of our customers. We maintain this building, and in fact now we are in the position to renew the whole building. We maintain here. It's a project as well. We try to help the House of Parliament in the Netherlands to improve their buildings, to make it safer and keep it up to date. Also, one of our projects we do in the Netherlands.
Already 3 quite different areas, right? And now the 4th example you brought is the one where you did your process mining exercises. So which area is this?
This is the service area where I'm working in. When you have a building, it can be a property from your own, a house, or or it can be a shopping mall or something else. Buildings that are built has to maintain, and we are the part. We help to the companies to maintain their buildings. That can be preventive maintenance. That's every year we go to watch if the heating is okay. It can be a malfunction. You call us as a malfunction. A lamp is not working. A door is not opening. It's too cold. It's too hot in the building. Then my colleagues go to the building and they help out to solve the problem. There's very 4 parts of our company in a total different way of working. Where Heijmans is a construction company and always think about working in a project. We work set-based. We start and we have an end, and in between it's happening, and that is the culture in our company. And I'm working in a service company, and I ask my colleagues, are we a project organization or do we have more to bring? Is every project is different? Is our maintenance project is it always different, or can you compare them with each other, and can we find out if there is a process in it? And that's my job, and that's why I start process mining to investigate from what can we see there.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, maybe so. One thing I was thinking about also before here preparing for the session is that in a way, and I'm curious also Rudi whether you recognize this, in the past I would say 10-20 years there has been a lot of work of kind of creating a process awareness in organizations, let's say that are not so project driven. It wasn't there from the beginning, right? I think it was a really conscious effort, and kind of BPM practitioners, for example, were creating this awareness, like what a process is and how a process is the basis of everything you do. So yeah, that's something that companies have been quite busy with, right? Rudi, do you also recognize this?
Yeah. So what I see, and if it goes back and you look back in time, even before process mining, BPM was a discipline. Yeah. And what I see in practice is kind of a management discipline. And if it's a management discipline, it's broader than just having a process, right? You can draw out a process and then lift it out and then discuss it. But it's more about how to manage that process, how to improve it, how to keep a particular goal. So you can reduce particular cost in a process, or you want to increase volume of a particular process. So then it becomes kind of part of the way of working. So how do we manage these processes? How do we include new processes as part of our organizations? And how do we manage them? But yeah, when I started using process mining as well, I also started to realize that this was kind of a conceptual idea, right? So we draw and make these processes, we put them in a book, and then say to everyone who is part of the process, you should work like this because we have designed it like this. Yeah. But if you look at the practice, that doesn't happen, right? So these processes are also a concept that in a general sense will probably work, but in a lot of other examples doesn't work. And that's kind of interesting why we are talking to Fred, of course. And because one of my first questions would be, it's more kind of the 101, is what's kind of the difference between the project and the process, right? So if you look at your processes, you already distinguish between kind of what you are doing in these bigger construction sites, for example, versus the service. So what are kind of the properties of these processes, which you would say, these are kind of processes which we should manage in a particular way.
Yeah, what we see at the construction company, and that's the reason I picked some pictures to show, is the culture of our company is project based. We start and we have an end, and between that it's happening. when we go to the service organization, it's a small part of the bigger company, and the DNA of thinking about a project is the same. Yeah? And for an intersection, for example, we work probably a year, 2 years, and it's finished. But in our service company, we have a contract with our customer, for example, Schiphol, what I showed, or the House of Parliament, that can be for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So are we still speaking about a project, or is it more like a project? And when you compare all projects with each other, does they have something in common with each other? Yeah. And that is what we're discussing, because when I talk to the different contract teams, they always say, no, we are unique. Our contract, our agreement with the customer is unique, so we have our own process. And that is the mindset. No one is thinking about can we compare? So we use process mining and discussion with the employees in the different teams. Tell me what's happening in your contract. What's happening with your customer? How do you make your service process work? And then they start thinking, and they say, maybe there is more we have to compare. There's more that we do the same. But it's not in our DNA. We don't think about process driven, and it's a logical sense, because a lot of people working in a service company of us are mainly started in a project. So the mindset is project, not process.
Yeah. And you, as the process miner, right? You need to bring that in, this perspective.
Yeah. So. Yeah, you have to bring the perspective to discuss. One of the things I do, we have a training that's called asset management, and we talk to the management of the contract teams. And I always ask the questions do you have a process? No, we don't have a process. We are unique. And then I ask, okay, tell me, how do you? And in this case, we go to the corrective maintenance. That is when there is a malfunction in a building. There is also a financial part of it. So it's very important that process is working well from start till end. And I ask them, tell me, how does it work in your project? Oh, they say it's very easy. We start with someone is calling our customer care center. They report the malfunction. After that, we go have a look. What's the problem? Can we solve it directly? Do we have to take an order to materials, or do we need a subcontractor? And after that, when we have repaired, we have a look for, okay, how do we get the invoice? And when the invoice is out, our service order is ready. Now, so I asked one, and they said, okay, your colleague, how do you do that? Actually the same. I'm also starting with a report of a malfunction. We're going to have a look. Say, okay, so now we agree that we see a common steps into and phases in the work you do. So that is the first thing that they think, okay, I'm not that unique from my colleague. But it's always the answer, we have some different agreements with our customers. So I believe that it's the truth that every contract and every customer has their own wishes. And then you can, the difference is in what you do, not in the process. It's more similar than you think, and giving that insight is the first step of thinking, okay, that's that uniqueness. I'm not as unique as I thought I was. That's
Yeah. So what I recognize, right? So if you are looking kind of more at the lean principles, there's something like standard work, and so you kind of discuss something to find the common way of working, and eventually being able to say, yeah, this is kind of the standard work we have. Is this what you mean?
Yeah, you're trying to make them that there is a similarity in project and in the way we work. Yeah. And that's for a lot of my colleagues, it's a new world, because they always think I'm unique. I'm doing the things on my own way. And when you have a deep dive, you see actually we're doing the same, maybe on different times, but we're still doing the same steps in the process. Yeah. That is the awareness. That's the first step we did to make it aware that there is.
Yeah. And if you take a step back, and if you look at the two different ways, right? So if you would continue managing it by project and let the people do the work how they think they should do, versus managing it more like a process, and then and maintain it kind of as a process. So how do you see the big difference between both of them? So what's kind of what you want to get out of it to do it differently?
Yeah, what you see is when they think about uniqueness, people get work to themselves. We are unique, so we do it our own way. So a lot of knowledge in a contract, in a service contract, is situated at one person. So one person knows exactly how to work, what it will do. Well, the person on the other side of the colleague on the other side of the table from another contract, another service contract, is doing exactly the same, but they don't know it from each other. And that's a bit of a risk for our company. But when and the technician in the Netherlands, there's a lot of jobs. When someone leaves, there's also a lack of knowledge, because all the knowledge is situated by one person, and we try to show that the work is more similar than they think, so that they have to talk to each other and see what the difference are and where the similarity is. So you can your company can have the improvement and we have the continuity to our work. When someone leaves, it can happen that we are totally panicked because no one knows what to do. Yeah. In fact, we have another colleague who can step in and do the right thing. It's not that different.
Yeah, so that's one of the advantages of making the processes explicit, and then also having them available makes it possible to look at them more critically, right, and to improve them maybe in a more structured way. So I think that's what you wanted to do, right? And so you wanted to apply process mining, but that's also a little bit of a challenge. Like, if this kind of thinking isn't there, how do you find the data, which is always kind of process-related data, right? So you also brought some slides to illustrate your approach a little bit, and let me bring that up, because there basically we can see exactly what you just explained, that you first went to talk to the people who are thinking completely on a project basis, like, I'm doing this one contract in this way, right? But you asked them to tell which kind of stages they go through, and then these are the stages that appear to be common even among different projects or among different contracts.
Service, in the different service contracts we saw that there was a similarity. The stages are exactly the same in every contract. We don't send an invoice at the first site before we come. There are technical suppliers who says we first send an invoice and then we come to solve your problem. Yeah. We don't do that. All our financials is taking part at the end of our process. So that's, and for a lot of people, to define the stages is already a mindset that they think, okay, I recognize what I do. So it's the way we work. The stages we defined, we see that in every contract, in every service contract, in every team. It's the same, and when we have the discussion and we say to each other, yes, this is the stages we recognize and we approve it, then we have the first step taken to make a process, and then it's the question, how do we find a process? And then process mining came in and helped us to show them how their processes work.
Was the notion of these stages, was it already there? So was that something that was kind of already available, or was this something you introduced?
We introduced it. There were some stages defined, but not the stages we have here. So and people, the defined status, what I told you, we are unique, so we don't recognize these stages. We're reporting and financial. We see. But okay, we have an execution phase and a handling phase. Okay, then, so it's more improved that in the way of thinking that they accept that these stages are there, and that's the first step we took before we even start thinking about and how is our process looking, how is it managed.
I think that's a really good tip for anyone else who's in the same situation, because it's quite loose, right? If you're at this level, if you're seeing here 5 stages, it's pretty broad buckets, if you will, let's say. I think it's easy to agree on, even if there's not kind of a defined process, that these are kind of the buckets that roughly the process goes through, right? Yeah. And then with process mining, I think the advantage is that you don't have to define top down, let's say, how the process flows and then be very explicit, because maybe it's not that defined. You can do it in this order, you can do it in that order, but that you go in this bottom up way by looking for the data, right? And for this, you were looking at the different status codes.
Yeah, but what we use the SAP system, and in the SAP system we have status settings. Every status it can be set. It's an open system, so what our workers do is to set a status to show where are we in the process. What I did was to find out which status in SAP belongs to what stages we agreed on. So that was the second step we did, and that was very helpful for with process mining, that we can make a view from a visualization of how our process is working, used by the statuses.
Yeah, and it's still pretty loosely grouped, right? You're not saying anything about the specific order. It's just like where does it belong roughly, like in which bucket?
More where is our service order situated in which stage? For example, in the execution stage, we use the first one is it's translated execution. Okay, it's very logical that in the execution stage we have a status called execution, or we have an inspection. Before we go to execute, maybe we have to inspect first what is going on. So, and people are using the statuses not in a way, because we have an open system. It's not a straight-through processing, so people can choose which status they use. This inspection can be used, or they can say we skip that one and we go directly into execution phase.
Yeah. So it's a really flexible process where people can go any route. Yeah. And also in the lower right, there's a status. Did you not associate that with any stage? Or?
Yeah, that is one. It can happen that a customer reports a malfunction, and it can be that the malfunction is solved already, or it's a double report. The two person at the same office report the same problem, and then we have to skip the one out of the system. But we never have an agreement in our organization. When do we use that status? Do we use that in the first part or at the end? So that one it's going through all the process. It can appear in all different stages, because we don't have an agreement from where and when we use that status.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the statuses, and then of course I think the case ID is really clear because it's a contract number, right? So there's no ambiguity there.
Every malfunction reported has its own service call, its own unique number. Yeah.
Okay, and so then you applied process mining. With that data.
With the service order, the status is our activity. So the activity is based on the status. And of course, the timestamp we used, and because we have an open system, the status can be used multiple. And in process mining, we said we only take the last time status is set.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
There's choices you make. We can say we can use all the status, but when they use 10 times we press on execution, we have a line of 10 executions, and we said no, we don't do that. We only use the last one, so we have a clear picture of when which status is set.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so then you use that data, all the minimum requirements are there, and you put it in the process mining tool. So here you put a picture, like 3 examples of the corrective maintenance process. Let me see. Does it update like this? So what did you learn from that?
We saw a process. We saw that there was a process in the project thinking. We at the background we have a process, and you see that there is a similarity in in our processes there is a common sense. You see, is a lot of variation in the processes. I guess the first one we did, we had almost 17,000 variations. That's a lot. And I always say we have to try to bring that back and go back to maybe 1,000 or 5,000. Who says what's the right number? But we have to try to remove the variations in our process. And that was the first time when we show our contract teams from this is your process, this is how it works. And they were amazed. They say, okay, we have a process. And they also can see in what stages, what problems appear in what stages. They never knew what was happening. They think we start one and with an end, and it costs us 60 days or 80 days or maybe 10 days. But now they can see in every phase what's happening in the process, and that was an eye opener for a lot of management that they see this for the first time. And we are a technical organization, and when you make it something visual and you have a tool for that, then you catch them. Then they're interested. From show me what would you have and what kind of information can you give to me, and yeah, that was a breakthrough in our organization that we took the second step in process thinking instead of project thinking.
Yeah.
And Fred, what's the difference between these three processes? Because they are all corrective maintenance. So are they different requests or different products?
It can be that in the first part of the process we see a similarity. When there's a malfunction, this is our corrective process. When there's a malfunction or there's a complaint about it, these days it's too hot in the building, or in the winter it's too cold. It's going to our customer care center. The customer rings, and you see that this is equality in every contract. The first status are the same. After that, it starts to get flurry and blurry, and then you see the difference in contracts. You can see, for example, it's a service mechanic, who is repairing, is also ordering when he needs materials. Is he doing that, or it's going back to our back office and do they order? That's the difference we see. We can see that in our invoicing, it can be different. Some customers say you can send monthly an invoice. Some say you can directly send us an invoice, and some say we get a fee, and from that fee we take the money out, and it's a different way of invoicing. So that's what you see also in the difference. So you can see the difference in contracts, and it disappeared on process mining.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And this is also trigger the discussion about the differences in the contracts, because I can imagine it's much easier to manage similar contracts than having a lot of variation in these contracts. And sometimes the decision to have these kind of different rules in these contracts are implicit, right? So it's just we're sitting in the table, and then the customer is saying what they want, but sometimes they don't know what they want. So if it's either the one or the other, for them often it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's an opportunity for standardization, right? By providing them with kind of a standard alternative. Is that what you mean, Rudi? Yeah.
So did it trigger that discussion, and how did it go? Because it could also be that we just have different contracts because our customer wants different things, right? So then you cannot change anything about it.
The funny part is that the status, what you see it's a lot of common status in a project. Sometimes they use the system in the wrong way, so you can find out from it's not right what's happening here. So, but the insight it gave us more from process mining is from in what kind of phases is appearing a problem. Where is a managerial problem? This the awareness of the steps, because we now agree that we have a process, but it gives also insight in where we can improve our process and where we can learn from each other. Because we are not that unique. What we discussed in the beginning of the cafe, we are not as unique as we think we are. So we have to now we have to get in a stage where we agree on that we have a process, and that a process that we find out the smart way to work. How can we standardize?
And that's a little bit connected to what you said earlier, which I find so interesting. Is what you said is once you showed this picture to the people, to the managers and so on, they immediately recognized it, right? And that's an experience that we also see a lot, right? Really with other people, like that often the people who are doing process mining, maybe they are used to working with processes. Maybe they're process improvement specialists or BPM practitioners or Lean Six Sigma experts. Or for them, process mining processes, are nothing new, and they're kind of used to thinking in this way. But also in, let's say not so much project-driven organizations. Often people who are really close to the operational work, they don't think in processes, right? They think in their tasks at hand. And also there, because process mining is so accessible, you show a process map like that to someone who's working in the process. They don't need to be a process expert, a BPM practitioner. They don't need to learn any kind of modeling notations or something. Just knowing the work that they do and seeing a process map like that, it's quite intuitive to them, and they can immediately, it triggers these kind of discussions, right? That we just mentioned.
And it's also, it works the other way around, right? So if you start working on these processes, it can be that people feel they have this feeling of uniqueness or being special because they have this special knowledge, right? But if you show them that their process is kind of standard, then their uniqueness is also you take that away. So that also requires something that you say, we standardize, but how do we deal with this feeling of working in these standardized processes? It's not in a sense that everything is standard, right? So to give you an example, if you look at a claims process or a healthcare process, these are often case-based processes. So from a higher level, these processes are kind of the same after that diagnosis. So I have a diagnosis, and then I do the treatment, and then they follow kind of a protocol for the treatment, which can be defined as a process. But it doesn't mean that they would always follow the same protocol. It's up to the case specialist to make the best decision for that particular case. And it's probably working the same way for these type of contracts, right? So they are in interaction, and they know, and besides having the standard process with all these interactions, they know how the customer is feeling and what is actually needed at these special situations, right? So I can imagine that if there is a request that somebody lost their keys and they need to get in, but they know that there is a situation that someone is in the building and they need to get out, that you need to act quickly, compared to when it's Saturday afternoon and nobody needs to get in, that it can be Sunday morning, right? So you still need to be able to figure out these nuances and be the expert.
Exactly. Maybe that's a good point to bring in one comment that we got in the chat. So Marcus is saying that projects are defined by uniqueness, time, budget, and risk. Above all, to manage the risks, there are process frameworks, and he mentions Heijmans in Switzerland, the V model, Scrum, etc. in place. And then the effectiveness or usage of the framework can be analyzed with process mining over various projects, right? That's one view to look at project-based organizations, that every project is like one case and you can look across multiple projects, like at the process. Yeah. And I think with the maintenance one, it's a little bit different because you have these continuous processes, which you maybe even need to break up into smaller ones. Yeah. But so he mentioned these frameworks, and that's maybe another good point. So I'm curious, Fred, are there specific kind of frameworks or project frameworks that are in use at your organization?
There are some frameworks, yeah. We have different frameworks in the company. What Marcus says, I agree. Every project, and when you look at the project, you can always define some path, and the framework you make. What we do is the framework we build in our system, in our processes. There are several variations in it, and that is what we describe in that framework. So we define the different frameworks we recognize.
Yeah, so I've seen some process mining exercises on project management data, right? So you also have these systems where they create these projects and then have these several activities or phases for these projects, and it can be based on the V model or any other type of framework, Prince 2 or Scrum, Agile, and what's important if you are using this to evaluate projects is, again, to have something common, right? So if you have kind of a framework, you are producing something. But if you are producing different things, then the process or the performance of these processes or maybe the stages will be different. So the question is, of course, also what are you trying to analyze? And so if these projects are bringing in and producing kind of the similar outcome, then you can compare them. But if they are producing a very different outcome, then it will be much more difficult to compare them, right? So, and that's kind of the nice thing what you did in the analysis, because these requests are kind of have a similar tie to the same contract, right?
Yeah. We looked at very different. We did also a deep dive in it. And it showed just the process we looked at, the different process, the different variations. And we were wondering, are people aware that there is a difference? And I can recall a conversation we had in one of our offices, and we had 3 teams, different contract teams were invited, and we showed them. We asked them why took it a long time here? For example, from execution to invoice, and in your situation, it's going very fast. So what's happening? And you saw that the employee in the back office, one said, I am waiting that my co-worker says that I can get in action. The other says, are you doing it? I go to the co-worker and I look in the system what's coming to me. So you see that the duration, the processing time of some tasks can be improved by talking to each other. They do exactly the same, but in a very different perspective. One is reactive, the other one is proactive. That's what you can show, and that is what's nice about process mining. You can discuss it, and then you can have a look and what kind of framework in lean thinking. How can we improve this? And when people talk to each other, it's more powerful than I say that they have to work in a different way. It's better that they say we have to change. We also saw in a deep dive, was one of our other offices, we saw a lot of rework. We think, what's happening here? We were very fast in making the malfunction. We had a malfunction, and in 2 hours it was fixed. And after that, it took us only a month or 2 months to get to the invoice. So I asked, what's happening here? The customer was satisfaction was very high, because all malfunctions were very fast executed, were solved. What's happening? The service mechanics were not informed in what kind of information we need to get the invoice. So you saw in the process mining there was a very fast execution phase, and the invoice phase was much too long because the needed information wasn't there to get an invoice. So all the work was going back to the service mechanic. And to make that aware, to say, that is what we did with process mining, to discuss what's happening here, to ask questions. In that case, insight. And they were very happy with that kind of examples to improve their process. And instead of thinking about project, they start thinking about processing. I have to inform my colleague what to do so I can do my work afterwards. And without process mining, we couldn't have showed them what was happening, because everyone was working very hard and tried to solve problems, but not knowing where exactly the root cause analysis was missing from what's happening here. It was a common sense that it's always happening this way, and we showed no, it's not happening, because in another contract we see something different happening. It took more time in the execution phase. But the invoice phase is also very, it's a lot less longer than in your case. So you see when you start the conversation, the discussion with people, they learn about the process. They learn about what's happening in their contract. They learn how to improve themselves instead of saying what they have to do.
Yeah, exactly. So process mining provides the basis for opening up these discussions, right? Getting people to think in this way by themselves. And then because it's coming from them, like you said before, it's different compared to you coming, like you have to change, you have to do this and this and this. It's much more powerful if it comes from them. Yeah. And they come up with these ideas themselves, because then they are the ones who need to change their way of working, right, in the future. Maybe before we continue with the points that we collected, like to give as advice to people what they need to pay attention to when they are in a similar situation, I wanted to just add from a process mining perspective, actually not planned, but it just occurred to me, like, because we were talking about projects, right? So I actually looked up a quick project here, if we can maybe bring my screen back, like for the process mining practitioner perspective. So when you get project-based processes, so this is a process from 120 different projects, right, which go through some kind of system release and test process. And so one thing you will notice, and so let's change to the case view here, to the case perspective, case frequency. You see there's a lot of parallelism. So if you're looking really on this kind of really high-level project and comparing different projects with process mining, in each project a lot of things are happening in parallel. So this is something that's very typical that you will find in project-based processes, where, for example, here, if I zoom in a little bit, you see these kind of milestones, right? So these milestones are when things come together. So you have to kind of complete a lot of different parallel streams of work until then there's a delivery or some kind of review, and then there's a go ahead. Okay, we can go into the next phase of the project. So you see these kind of milestones coming together and then going out again. But then you see all these parallel branches, right? So for example, all of these different tests, they're happening almost every time. But then, for example, maybe the project risk review is not needed for every project. Just 11 of the 120 projects had this project risk review, right? So that's just more on a kind of a technical process mining perspective. That's maybe something you can be aware of, that's something that you could encounter when you analyze these types of projects. That's just as an aside. And so maybe to come back to the things we wanted to collect for people, right? So we have these different things, Fred, that you already explained some of them. It's really, you have to go into these discussions with a very conscious mind that the people you talk to are not process experts, don't think in processes. And so we basically made a list of the things that you really need to be aware of as the process mining person and to be really conscious about. And some of the things we already talked about a little bit, but others maybe not. But just to recap, I think is still useful. So the first one we wrote down is this aspect of uniqueness, right? So how everyone thinks their project is unique, but then, that's actually only partly true, right?
Yeah.
And with these contracts, that there are things maybe to find ways to make it less unique, but at the same time, it's maybe also not necessary to have everything standardized, right? So this is, I think, then the opportunity to find the right level of uniqueness. So I think, did we discuss everything about the uniqueness part, or do you want to add anything about that?
No. I think it's very clear that when with process mining we showed that there is more common than uniqueness, and always a contract has unique points. We don't have to forget we work for a customer. Every customer has their own wishes, but what we have to look at is from what binds us together. What makes us. I always say a process is also the base of our system. We want to work in a system. I always told my colleagues it's impossible for, I think we have 300 types of contracts to build a system for 300 contracts. It's impossible. So you have to find a way from what binds us, what is the base we work on. So we can develop an open system, but in a way that we do the same repeatable activities.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you also have encountered a process where you would not even apply process mining because it's too unique in a sense?
No, what I did, we took a lot of data of a lot of contracts, and actually we have a lot of variation. But when you have a helicopter above it, you can see that there is a similarity in it.
But did you look at complete different processes outside of service, maybe, where you would say, oh, this is not a good candidate for process mining, right? Because in a sense, it's maybe too unique to have a process, or we don't have the volume to make it interesting for process mining. So it's kind of the counterexample of what we are talking about.
Yeah, in the service company, we did it. We saw there is a common. What I see, a lot of technicians in the other business streams are also interested, and they start to try to find also the processes. And in some cases, it isn't working, but in the mainstream, we see that they can define a process from the data. Okay. And there's always some steps. Maybe it's 4 or 5. It's set in the position. That's what we see. I'm not that deep in that information. That's of my colleagues, but I know they're looking also in very special projects. The intersection I showed, for example. There is also a kind of services involved after the project. Yeah, maybe there is. It gives also a common sense, and what we try, and this in the infrastructure business stream, we have 4 business units as well, service units, and they were totally different. And now they're, and that's the question you have, and is it that unique that they don't have a similarity in it, or that is what they try to find out now. Also with process mining, I know that they're looking from maybe we have to start a discussion over there too, and maybe they're not as unique as they are. So
that's an interesting question. Yeah. I'm just thinking also really maybe we can point to this article that we wrote once as a guidance, like which process is suitable for process mining, because you do see kind of different levels of how structured something is, or also how frequent something is. If something is really like completely ad hoc process and every time done differently, maybe it's not that useful, right, to analyze it with process mining. But
exactly. If you have a very low frequency or volume, so just a couple of cases a year, for example, or very long running cases in the legal system, for example, you see these very complex cases which are very, very long with a lot of these activities, then you can argue whether or not it's useful to look at it from a more standardization point of view. But there's another thing, and that's again with the hospital example. If you look at everything that often happens before you are having the diagnosis, it's very unplanned, right? So it's very complex in a sense. So there could be different things. It could be that they first ask for a blood test and then doing an MRI scan, or first doing the MRI scan, then a blood test, or no MRI scan at all. So it's not planned in a sense. Everyone do it kind of at their own way, and then you have these diagnoses, and then you start kind of the treatment path. So also, if you would apply process mining, you are still discovering these processes, and maybe you can discover part of the treatment, but you would not be able to discover kind of a very big pattern leading up to the treatment. That could be, but it could also be that you won't find this.
That's a good example. Yeah.
And this is kind of interesting. So not all or everything you are doing within a company is a process, right? So, and that's also what I had to learn from practice, is that somehow you have these process glasses and you see everything kind of through these process glasses, and then say everything is a process. But everything could be a process, but from a case base it could be, but from a reality perspective it could also not be. It could be something else. And that's, if you look at the whole domain of case handling, for example, or complaints claim management, is kind of the same thing. They have a clearly defined case, so a claim number, and they need to make a decision. That's kind of the end point of the whole claim process, and then pay it out, of course, the financial part of it. But the whole leading up to the handling of the claim is very unpredictable. They do a lot of activities, but they don't have a specific order for it. It's up to the claim expert in order to define this. And they need to gather everything and then make a final decision. So it's more case-based. You can still apply process mining to see whether or not you can identify certain properties of a claim that kind of make them more standard compared to the other ones. But there is a group of claims that will never be part of the standard.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But then on the other side, again, to highlight once more what Fred said before, often when you look, especially if there's sufficient volume on the suitable level, you will find these common areas, right? And that's also from a process mining technician, let's say, perspective, that's something you need to keep in mind when you're looking at the variance. So if you're looking at the variance based on the pure plain data or the raw data, then often you see a lot of variation. Like Fred, you said maybe thousands of variants, right? But that doesn't mean that these are really completely different ways of doing the process. If you go a level up, for example, by applying the milestone simplification method, and we can also add this pointer when we, with the show notes when we publish the recording, you can even for very complex processes, you can identify kind of the common milestones, and across these common milestones, you will see a process that's common again. So it's also a question of on which level do you think about uniqueness, right? On the very detailed level or more on a high level? And maybe for unstructured processes, maybe you have to look at them a little bit more on a high level. Okay, so uniqueness. So the next one, I think we also talked about it a bit already as a point of attention, that the work and the knowledge are very much attached to a person, right? And that's good, and has also some disadvantages. And you already mentioned, Fred, what if this person is leaving? But I think there's also other aspects to that. Maybe people might be reluctant to give up their knowledge. Did you encounter anything like that when you talk to them? Yeah,
they want to keep the knowledge with them, but then you come back to the uniqueness. From I'm a person, and I'm very responsible in this project, in this service project. And that's what we discussed as well. People are doing a lot of work the same, on the same way, on the same. So you have to think about it from the perspective from what gives it our organization. Do we have to develop a lot of systems and possibilities in the system to work out, or can we share that knowledge? Why can't you? We have 10 branches in the Netherlands. Why does everyone has to find out by problems to solve the problem? Just to find out from what's happening here and how can I solve it? Well, a location in the country have already solved the problem, and you have to bring people together to talk about their work. What you can see from process mining, from what they do, so you know this kind of people are coming in. So you have to address them to share their knowledge. Tell from what you're doing, how you do it, and that's what you with process mining by process time can see from what's happening here. Why can someone do it in 5 minutes and another one does it in 1 week?
You did some benchmarking, right? So that's one of the things that, let me show that too. So you basically looked at the similar processes, but then also looked at timing and basically to compare how different.
But what we wanted to do is a top-down, bottom-up approach. And what we did is that we made the corrective process we have. That's what we are investigating from what's happening here. We made we have 10 locations in the Netherlands. So we first of all said what is happening in overall. When we look at the country, what's happening there. Then we made the phases we mentioned earlier. We set it out in the phases we discovered from with the statuses. That's the second step, so they can see what's happening in the country and what's happening in which stage. Then we go to the location, and we said, okay, when we look at the location, how do they? When you compare it with the whole company, how does this location work? Is there a difference? Is it in a positive way or in a negative way? In how they function. After that, we made also a drill down to the teams. We have teams, and teams can have more than one service contract. So we showed the contracts from what is their number in the phases. What processing time do they need in the different phases? And then you can discuss with each other from, hey, in the location, what's happening between the teams? Does the team know that they do it faster, or are they taking more time to solve a problem? And what they do we have a very competitive organization. So the first thing they do I do 3 hours or 1 week, and you, my colleague from another team, is doing it in 10 weeks. Yeah, then you have to ask yourself: is 1 week better than 10 weeks? That's a serious question. What I said to the people: don't judge about what you see, because you don't know how a contract is built up. And for example, Schiphol Airport, the example, our service technicians are working on that place. So when there is a malfunction and it's reported, they're very fast to go to solve the problem. But we also have a contract where people, our service technician is working for more than one customer, and have to travel by car to solve the problem, to solve the malfunction. So that takes more time to come to our customer than our people who are situated at the contract in the building. So you can't say that 1 week is better than 10 weeks. Maybe that 1 week can be very slow instead, and 10 weeks can be very fast. So you have to try in this approach not to judge in the first time from that 10 weeks is better than is worse than 1 week. Yeah. And when you start discussing that, it's also a trigger to don't judge too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find so interesting is that it works both ways, right? You make this comparison, this kind of benchmarking, and on the one hand side, it's an opportunity. So from the previous point that we talked about, like that the knowledge is very much attached to a person, but by making it explicit, people find opportunities like, oh, you are doing it this way. Yeah. Maybe I can do it this way, right? They discover kind of best practices by looking at how others are doing it. But at the same time, and that's kind of the third point of attention that we also wrote down here, is to say, well, if you as a process miner present people with such an overview, be aware that immediately they will compare themselves to others, and maybe it's not comparable. So you also need to kind of protect them in a way a little bit to feel bad, like, oh, we do this in 10 days and others do it in 5 days. Maybe there's a very good reason for why these different performances are. So you need to kind of bring that in and kind of protect people from judging too quickly, right?
Yeah, but it gives also insight. Right? We found out in one of our contracts that in one execution phase, it took a very long time, and we saw by process mining that it was pulsing the information. So we start talking about it and what's happening here, and what our service technician have a tablet or a laptop when they go to a malfunction head, and we ask them to write down what they see, what's happening, what they need. There's all the kind of information they store in their laptop, so in the service order. And what we saw is that all the service technicians at that contract didn't work with their tablet or with their laptop, but they go with a piece of paper back to their chief. And the chief was working all the information what was handed to him in paper in the system. So we saw that the processing time took a lot of time, and they weren't aware that the people there on that contract were not doing the job they have to do. In this case, the person got ill, the chief got ill because he had a lot of work to do. It was not his work; it was work of his co-workers, and that's one of the reasons that process mining can show it. We could show with the resource status from we see it's very strange that every time the same resource is working on this project, and that's what we found out when we make a drill down from the level to the team from what's happening here. And if we didn't see it, no one has in the contract knows what was happening on that contract. So it gives a lot of insight, and it starts the right conversation with the people for what's happening here. Tell me what's happening here, and how can we help you to improve?
Yeah.
So how are you doing it with these best practices? So you mentioned you have this kind of top level, right, where you make a benchmark and then see differences without any judgment yet. Yeah. And then you dive deeper, look into these individual processes. And how does it work? Because if you want to have best practices, then you need to organize something, right? So it's not automatically coming from the team. So how do you do it?
It helps us to make a standardized process. It helps us to define a good system that match with each other. So the process is supported by the system. But it's also another thing is happening is that we say to our management is from not looking at the process, but more in the way they work. From keep attention to your people. It's not only the process; it's also from what's happening here, and are you aware what is happening?
Yeah. Okay.
So you help them with the best practice, which you find, and that's what these examples we use in other locations where we come from. That they are aware that it's happening in our company. It gives the management also the possibility to steer at the right moment to a team, because a lot of knowledge what's happening in that team, they don't see what's happening. Our service technicians are outside a lot, are with our customers, and at the office we can't see what is happening there. Process mining gives us insight. It's not only making a process, but also improving our management to steer at the right moment.
So that means that you are continuously feeding them with kind of information in order to be able to steer or improve their processes.
We share information. It's not naming and shaming, but it's more that we share what we see and to keep them aware that it can also happen in their location.
Okay.
It's just next to process mining and making a process, it's helping us to improve our management.
Yeah. And how do you organize it then across these different contracts, right? Because I can imagine what happens then that some manager who's responsible for that contract would ask you specifically about the process for that particular contract, but then you are not sharing best practices with other contracts, right? So how is that kind of organized that the managers kind of reflect on other processes which are kind of similar but servicing a different contract?
Yeah, what we do is every location in the Netherlands has its own service manager who is responsible for that location, and the service managers have once a month they come together and have an appointment with each other, and mostly 1 or 2 times a year or 3 times I join them as well. I speak a lot to them, but in the meeting I address this kind of best practices what we see. So they know what is happening in the country, how we improve our process with the knowledge. There's also at that point we help them to make them aware what's happening in the company, so that they can that they can help each other to improve themselves as a management team.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also, I think, what you mentioned earlier. That's one of the opportunities, right? By using process mining, you get the chance to take a step back and also look at the work across the boundaries of what their own responsibilities are, right? Different teams have to work together. And I think, Rudi, sometime earlier you mentioned that sometimes it happens that teams, let's say more downstream, they pick up the problems that were created earlier, but the people who create these problems earlier in the stream maybe are not even aware of that, right? So that's kind of a way to expose these things and then make them explicit.
Yeah. And that's nice of process mining tooling we have now from Fluxicon, that you can make it in a different perspective, from organizational perspective to a location, even to contract and people perspective. So it helps us to improve our company, to learn, to improve our management, and to make problems what keep what we don't see. It gives us insight in the problems we have but don't know we have them. You know what I mean? It gives us a lot of information from project thinking to process thinking, from firefight. I always tell our colleagues, when we throw a ball, everyone is going after that ball, and then we throw another ball, and everyone is going there. And instead of thinking, is it my job to do? So they're firefighters, and every problem we try to solve. It's a DNA of a technician. A technician wants to solve the problem, but you have also to think: is it my problem? And if not, who is responsible to solve that problem? And that you have to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe that connects a little bit nicely to another comment we got from Marcus in the chat, where he says, well, how about you think about it from the end point, from the outcome of the project, let's say. And so that's also one of the points that we wrote down. You need to have a discussion about what quality means, right? And how, if you want to analyze a process with process mining, you want to improve outcomes. So what is a good outcome? Is it, you mentioned already, rework? That's kind of inefficiencies that can be avoided. But also, for example, timing. Maybe it's not necessary to do something as quickly as you can. You just have to be on time, right? Being twice as fast, maybe there's no benefit to that. So then you could actually use the resources in a different way. So how do you go about these kinds of discussions of what the desired quality is in terms of outcome?
Yeah, the funny part is when you talk about it, what you mentioned already is, are we doing the right thing at the right time? That's the discussion we have. Is the right person doing his work? The outcome is very important, and in our technician world, solving the problem, when the malfunction is over, it's solved, then we are ready. That is the goal of a technician in our company. And then they forget from, okay, maybe we need to inform our customer in the right time that it's solved. What do we learn from the malfunction? For example, it was at my own spot. The light bulb above my head was broken. So I called our technician and said, the light bulb is broken. Can you come and fix it? Now, he came, fixed it. After 3 weeks, it was broken again. So I called it, it's broken again. He solved it and went away. So we solved the problem, but we didn't think, is the light bulb broken? Is it the problem of the light bulb, or is the lamp, the whole structure, is there a problem? And that is what we with process mining tries to tell them as well. Is from don't look only at the to solve the problem, but try to find out what's happening more. The rework, not only the rework that I miss information, but maybe we compare 3 service orders that we can say, hey, why are we standing here for the 3rd time here? So there's another way of thinking, what we try to give them.
Yeah, that's also the mindset, because you mentioned firefighting, right? So if you look at the trait of being a firefighter, then of course you are not taking the time to do a proper analysis, right? So that's kind of has then also to change. So if you are moving from this single project solution kind of setup where you start managing a process, then you start focusing more on quality. But then you need to take a little bit more time in order to improve. Yeah. And that's what I quite often see within these organizations that start to manage processes. That if they are so busy with the process itself, they don't have any time to implement or standardize the process, because they are so heavily involved in just executing the process. Yeah. So that's often also part of the challenge of how you free up time in order to give the individuals as part of the process time in order to take a step back and look at their process to make some improvements.
Yeah, it's both. It's taking the time to actually take the step back and look at things and maybe find opportunities, but then also that's also one of the points we wrote down, is like, how do you get this new way of working to stick, right? If you have done that, and if you've looked at, maybe we should do it in a different way. For example, I think, Fred, you had one example that you mentioned some time where people were writing down their time back when they were in the office or something. Yeah. Can you share that story again?
Yeah, what we saw with process mining was in the execution phase that it went very fast. And then we asked from, what are you doing in those times? They say, we solved the problem, and when we go to the next malfunction or other work, what was to be done. Then the discussion came from, okay, what is the time when you fill in your information in your tablet or on your laptop in the service order, that you have been there, what you have done, what you have seen, how to maybe for the invoice information. And they said to us, we work from Monday till Friday morning, and in the afternoon we go handle our service orders. Then I asked, did you know on Friday at 3 p.m. what you did at Monday morning at 9 a.m.? Yeah, and I'm not so sure about it. So one of my colleagues said, what I want is at the moment that you are solving a malfunction and you have solved it, write down your time, because end it well. Just make it at that moment, because the time you're writing down what you have done, maybe you have to clean up the place where you are. Those times we can make an invoice to our customer. And what now happens is that we solve the problem, and the extra time we have done is not seen as that we do it for our customer, but the information we collecting is also valuable for our company, but also for our customer, that he knows what's happening, what we've done. So take the time, and maybe it takes 15 minutes, but if in a customer, and we have 3,000 service calls a year, and we can do 15 minutes, it's a lot of money we lose in our company. Because it's coming to our own cost, instead of we can transfer it to invoice it to our customer, and that kind of thinking, it's not common. So that's what we saw in process mining. If you say maybe you can take more time in your execution phase, because we can also get it to invoiced by our customer. That's
And the financial department was very busy on Monday morning.
Yeah, just to repair. Yeah, that's happening as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a really nice example. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. But then, how do you get this to stick? So is this something that the idea is there once? Oh yeah, this is a better way to do it. But yeah, isn't there a risk also that people fall back into old habits? How do you prevent that?
And that takes, in Dutch we say, it takes a long breath to solve the problem. And we, for example, in one of our locations, we have managers working for 25, 30, 40 years at the company, and they are used to get one way of working, and you have to convince them that it also can be done in another way. And we can show that with process mining. We show them from when you take this path, it's going faster. You get more effort. You get more financial results. But you have to repeat, and go back and take it in small steps. I always, when I go to a team, I always say, focus on what you can improve. Make it a small project for yourself. Don't think I go change my whole process and improve my whole process. It's not possible, because the span of control is too big. You don't know what's happening, what influence each other, what maybe you're trying to do on the front side can be a negative at the back side. This morning I was at one occasion, I said, try to focus on what you think is best for the team, and make it together. Make as a team effort to improve, not one person, but the whole team, and discuss it with each other. And when you have improved, call me. I can take the new data set, and I can see what is the effect of what you did on the process mining. So I can show you what the effort you took. I can show you in process mining, and then it's for the management. It's a kind. They can see what's happening. They can see what is the effect, the result of their effort, and that are small steps. And I always said Rome is not built in one day. It took years. So for us, it's the same. And try to understand what you're doing, and we can help. We can give insight. We can show you the result of your effort. And then we take the other step. Then we pick a new element out of what we see. And please don't make it too big. It's focus, and take the small steps. And with the information we get from the teams, we try to improve our test, and we try to improve the system. So where they're working with, so that there are helps to make it better, to make straight through processing. And the funny part is when I started at the company and we started with process mining, everyone said, no, we want an open system. The open system is the best, so we can go anywhere in the system. Now they're asking me, please, Fred, can you make a straight through processing so our service technicians know what they have to do? Just in the execution phase, what they do, what we do in the invoice state. So there's an other mindset, and that is how we can help them. And what I appreciate most of it is that it's their idea. It's not my idea. It's their idea to make this improvement, and then it stays.
Yeah, it's very, very good advice to keep it small, and also I think a nice addition, or let's say contribution that process mining can make indeed by making then the impact visible, because that's motivating. If you change something and then you can show, look, it has had this effect. That's very motivating for people.
So also to make it stick. So that's more what I have learned from the theory. So if you look at process management kind of as a management discipline, then they kind of define some role as a process owner and as a process manager. So do you see, in order to make it stick, that's crucial to have? And would you, or is the organization able to organize it that way, or are they choosing something else? So how do you think about?
What we see is we want the quality of our organization has to improve, and what we do with process mining is with the information we get is that we also make functions our co-workers make responsible for the tasks they have to do. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to in process in the way of working from here starts your responsibility and here ends it. So that's what we trying to do, and you see in the past where they did have a lot of work and did a lot of work, we also focus on that, make them responsible, and when it's something is not the right quality, go back to your colleague and don't solve the problem for your colleague, but let your colleague feel what he missed, and don't judge, but speak to each other. Don't throw it back from you make a mistake, you have now to solve it, but stay in touch and tell them, why are you doing this? Why do I need this? Why? Otherwise, my process, and you can see it in process mining, is stuck at this moment. So help me to do my job right. I need your help. And that's what we do, to make responsibilities, to make in the process, and we describe it that in the job, the function job in the job, we said this is what you do, and this is your responsibility. But it's not a cage. You have to think what you are doing. There's also out of the box, but customers, you have to help them. You have to, but always try to go back to the responsibilities you have in your job.
Yeah. So you are saying that you now create these task responsibilities, right? So it's very clear who is responsible of that, and it's of course a chain of responsibility. So are you already thinking about making someone responsible for the whole chain of responsibility and coordinating this? This is kind of the role what you are taking up now, right? Feeding with information, be open to the discussion, not be pushy about it, but to see where things are going wrong, to confront people about it, and then have a discussion how to solve it. So often you see that it kind of transitions into this role that helps everyone in the process to streamline it and to improve it. So do you also see that? Is there already a role kind of when it was project driven, and are they taking up this role in this new process role, and what are they doing then extra? Or is this still up for grabs, or is this something that needs to be developed over time?
we are developing it. The first steps we took was what we showed. First, making a process, agree that we have a process. Now we are agreeing in how to work a process, but we are still discussing who is a process owner, who's taking care of when there is a change in the organization. It can be in the process, it can be in the people we're working with, or in the organization. We bring that together, and what we now see, because we started from we are a centralized organization, centralized department to help, and what you see is that they need the help more. So they call me more often from Fred, please come help us, give us the insight. So it's in a natural way. They say from the responsibility of the process mining, the way of thinking of processing is more in my department now, in my business stream, and it's growing. We're sometimes we go back and we fell into old habits. It's happening. It's part of the deal, but the business is also searching for stability and people to help them to improve this, to discuss it. We repeat it faster, so we come back. It's not we come once, we tell you what to do, and we go back. No, we try to discussion in every location. We help them together with my colleague. Two of us, we help them to make it's a point of our agenda to stay. It's not a once. We don't do it once. We do it constantly. And when there is an improvement, we show it to the whole organizations and see that's what this is what the result is. What the effect is. So step by step, sharing. Then we grow together, and not big steps, but also the small steps.
Small steps, yes. No, that's really great. Yes, no, thanks a lot for sharing that. It's like we said in the beginning. It's not just for very project-oriented organizations like your company, but also I think very relevant for people who are even in companies that are maybe a little bit more process aware, have already their processes defined, maybe even modeled, or have a department that's busy doing these kind of things. Still, once you go and talk to the people who are in these operational units working in the processes, they are not thinking in processes that way. So all the tips I think that you discussed here and that you gave based on your experience, like keeping it small and how to talk to people and what to keep in mind, I think is very relevant, even also for a much broader group of companies. So thank you both for being here today for this really interesting discussion. I'm sure a lot of people out there can benefit from that. Thanks a lot, Rudi. Thanks, Fred, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
All right, so thanks to you also for watching our Process Mining Café today. As always, we will share the recording later along with all the pointers that we will mention, that we mentioned. We will be back only after the summer break. So the next thing that happens is Process Mining Camp on 23rd of June. Come to Eindhoven if you can. And then afterwards we will have a summer break and be back with the next Process Mining Café on 7th September on data quality. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye.